You ever have one of those childhood memories that just lodges itself in your brain? Not like a good memory, not like your first bike ride or anything, more like a scar. Something cold and sharp you touch occasionally just to make sure it's still there, still real. For me, it's the memory of a knock. Just a single, simple knock on the door during a sleepover at my buddy Ben's house when we were maybe 13, 14. It sounds mundane, right? Kids messing around, maybe a neighbor. But this knock, it was just silence. Deafening, absolute silence after that one distinct thump on the front door. It wasn't like any knock I'd ever heard before or since. Not knuckles on wood, more like something heavy, dense, hitting the door once with deliberate force but muffled like it was wrapped in cloth, or like it came from further away than the porch. Maybe, inside the walls, Ben, typical Ben, always the first to act, the one who never believed in ghost stories, just rolled his eyes. Chris and I just stared at that empty space where Ben had been standing literally a heartbeat before. My own heart was hammering against my ribs like it wanted out. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room, replaced by something thick and cold. Chris made this tiny choking sound like he was trying to say something but couldn't get the air. The silence was huge. It pressed in on us. Maybe he just stepped out quick, Chris offered, but his voice lacked any conviction. It was the kind of thing you say when you're desperately trying to convince yourself, not anyone else. Maybe he saw something, an animal. It sounded so lame, so flimsy against the sheer impossibility of what we just witnessed. But what else was there? We couldn't just accept that Ben had evaporated into thin air. That wasn't possible, right? We checked the yard. Front yard, backyard, side path choked with overgrown bushes. We whispered Ben's name, our voices thin and lost in the night air. Nothing. The only response was the chirp of crickets and the distant hum of the highway. Ben wasn't a prankster, not like this. He wouldn't hide for hours, especially not after something genuinely weird happened. This wasn't him. We circled back into the house, the relief of being inside immediately replaced by the oppressive feeling that we weren't alone. We moved upstairs. Ben's house was old, one of those places with creaky floorboards and drafts that seemed to come from nowhere. Every step we took on the staircase groaned under our weight, broadcasting our position to whatever might be listening. We kept pausing, listening. Was that a floorboard creaking upstairs when we weren't moving? Was that a whisper carried on the draft? Probably just the house settling, we told ourselves. Just nerves. But the reassurances felt hollow. Then we checked the parents' bedroom. Ben's folks were out of town for the weekend, the whole reason we were having the sleepover in the first place. Their room felt weirdly off-limits, even in an emergency. It was neat, tidy, smelling faintly of his mom's perfume. Completely different vibe from the rest of the house. We did a quick sweep, looked in their closet, glanced under the large queen-sized bed. Nothing. As we were about to leave, Chris grabbed my arm. "Dude, listen," he hissed. I froze. We backed out of the parents' bedroom slowly, not taking our eyes off the closet door where the tapping seemed to have maybe originated. Or was it the wall? The uncertainty was maddening. Back in the hallway, the silence pressed in again. No more tapping. We stood there for a minute, just breathing, trying to process. "What was that?" Chris whispered, his voice barely audible. "I don't know," I admitted. Maybe it was just pipes, old house settling." Even as I said it, I knew it was bullshit. We must have sat there for another hour, maybe more, just listening, saying nothing. Every so often, one of us would clear our throat or shift position, and the tiny sound would make the other one flinch. The fear was a physical presence in the room, cold and heavy. We kept expecting the knock to come again, or the tapping, or something worse. My mind kept replaying the moment Ben vanished. The silhouette in the doorway, the slight crack of light, and then nothing. It didn't make sense. Suddenly, Chris gasped and pointed towards the staircase leading upstairs. "Did you see that?" he whispered urgently. I snapped my head around. "See what?" "A shadow." I thought I saw a shadow move at the top of the stairs, like someone peeked around the corner and pulled back. My blood ran cold. We both stared intently at the dark rectangle of the upstairs landing, barely visible from the living room couch. Nothing moved, just deep, impenetrable shadow. Was Chris imagining things? Climbing those stairs again was 10 times worse than the first time. We practically crawled, testing each step before putting our full weight on it, terrified of making a sound. Our flashlight beams shook, dancing nervously over the walls, the ceiling, the closed doors of the other rooms. We kept glancing behind us, convinced something was creeping up the stairs below. When we reached the landing, the spot where Chris thought he saw the shadow, the air felt colder, thicker. We swept our lights around. Nothing. How do you sleep in a situation like that? You don't. We just sat there listening. Every tiny sound was magnified, the wind whistling around the eaves, a branch tapping against the window pane making us both jump violently, the groan of the house settling. Was that a footstep in the hallway or just our imagination running wild? Hours crawled by. We didn't talk much. What was there to say? We'd whisper questions occasionally. Did you hear that? What time is it? It must have been around 3 or 4 a.m. That dead part of the night when everything feels wrong, even on a normal day. We were both still wide awake, nerves frayed raw. Suddenly, a new sound started. Not the knock, not the tapping. This was scratching, a faint, persistent scratching sound coming from the closet. My heart leaped into my throat. Chris grabbed my arm, his fingernails digging into my skin. We froze, listening intently. Scritch, scratch, scritch. The scratching stopped. Just like the tapping had earlier, it ceased abruptly, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier, more pregnant with menace than before. We waited, barely breathing, muscles coiled tight, expecting the closet door to fly open, expecting. Anything, nothing happened. The silence stretched, taut as a wire. Minutes passed, still nothing. Did it leave? Did it give up? Or was it just waiting on the other side of the door? What? What do we do? Then something shifted. Not a sound, but a feeling. The air in the room grew colder, noticeably colder. I saw my breath fog slightly in the faint moonlight. Goosebumps erupted all over my arms. Chris shivered violently beside me, pulling his sleeping bag tighter. It felt like a freezer door had been opened somewhere nearby. And with the cold came a smell, faint at first, then stronger. A damp, earthy smell, like freshly turned soil or wet leaves decaying in the woods. It wasn't a normal house smell. We couldn't take it anymore. The cold, the smell, the suffocating presence, it was unbearable. Staying put felt like consenting to whatever horror awaited us. The window, I croaked, my voice stiff with cold and fear. We have to try for the window. Chris nodded frantically, his eyes wide with terror but agreeing. Moving felt agonizingly slow, like wading through invisible sludge. Every tiny rustle of our sleeping bag sounded deafening. Defeated, we backed away from the window. There was nowhere left to go, nothing left to try. We huddled together again, not against the door this time, but in the corner furthest from both the door and the closet, trying to make ourselves as small as possible. The cold persisted, a tangible weight in the air. The earthy smell was overpowering now. And then the sound changed. No scratching, no tapping. It was a soft, wet slithering sound, like something heavy and damp being dragged across the floor. And then the knock came again. Not on the closet door, not on the bedroom door, but on the front door, downstairs. The exact same knock as before, that single, heavy, deliberate thump, muffled, precise. It echoed up the stairs through the terrified silence of the house. Chris and I snapped our heads up, staring at each other, then towards the bedroom door leading out to the hallway. Who? Was it trying to lure us out? Was it a signal, or was it something else entirely? As the echo of the knock faded, something else happened. Something small, almost insignificant, but in that heightened state of terror, it felt profoundly wrong. A piece of paper slid slowly under the bedroom door from the hallway outside. Just a plain white piece of folded paper, appearing silently in the gap between the door and the floor. It stopped right in the middle of the doorway. Chris and I stared at it, frozen. Who could have slid that under the door? No one else was supposed to be in the house. "Don't open closet," Ben's handwriting slipped under the door after the second knock downstairs. Where was he? Was he warning us? Was he okay? But if he wrote this, where has he been, and who knocked downstairs? My mind reeled, trying to piece it together, but the edges wouldn't fit. Chris read it over my shoulder, letting out a choked gasp. We looked at each other, the implications hitting us simultaneously. Ben wasn't just gone. He was here, somewhere, aware. They always tell you, don't stare too long into an old mirror, especially in the dark. I always thought it was just an old wives' tale, something to scare kids like Bloody Mary or whatever. But last year at Liam's place, during what was supposed to be just another Friday night sleepover with him and Mark, I learned that some warnings, well, they're out there for a reason. It all started with a stupid dare, obviously. My heart gave a thump, a single hard beat against my ribs like a trapped bird. I froze, right, my eyes wide, staring at myself, but was it? The reflection was still looking back, face identical, same worried frown starting to creep in. But that blink, it was so quick, so subtle, if I hadn't been laser focused on my own damn face, I would have missed it entirely. Everything okay in there, Alex? Time, Mark yelled, and Liam fumbled for the main light switch. The sudden harsh glare of the bare overhead bulb made me wince, and for a second I was blinded. When my vision cleared, I was still standing there, heart hammering, staring at the mirror. My reflection looked normal now. Just me, pale and a bit shaken, blinking against the sudden brightness. The smirk was gone, the unnerving intensity in its eyes vanished. It was just me. "So?" Liam asked, grinning, hands on his hips. We went back upstairs to Liam's room, full of the usual teenage mess, clothes on the floor, posters on the wall, a game console blinking idly. They quickly moved on, arguing about what movie to watch, stuffing their faces with pizza and chips. Normal. Everything was aggressively, terrifyingly normal. But for me, nothing felt normal anymore. Later that night, or rather early the next morning, when Liam and Mark were finally asleep, Mark snoring like a freight train, Liam muttering in some dream, I couldn't shut my eyes. Every time I did, I saw that smirk, that knowing, malevolent little twitch of the lips. I was lying on a sleeping bag on Liam's floor, staring up at the ceiling, where shadows from the streetlights outside danced and writhed like spectral figures. I couldn't resist. It was like an invisible force, a magnetic pull. My head turned slowly, almost against my will. My eyes locked onto the hallway mirror, and there I was, or there it was, just standing there, same pajamas, same messy hair, same terrified expression. For a split second, relief washed over me. It looked normal, just my own scared face. Maybe the basement thing was an illusion, maybe I was okay. And then it smiled, not a smirk this time, a full-blown, wide, unnatural smile. I finally tore my eyes away, a strangled sob escaping my lips. I didn't go to the bathroom. I didn't care anymore. I practically threw myself back into Liam's room, scrambling into my sleeping bag, pulling it up over my head like a terrified child. My heart was going to beat its way out of my chest. I was shaking uncontrollably, teeth chattering despite the stuffiness of the room. Morning eventually came, sunlight streaming weakly through Liam's dirty window. It felt anticlimactic. The world outside looked normal. Birds were chirping. A car drove by. But for me, everything had shifted, tilted on its axis. I felt like I was seeing the world through a distorted lens. My friends woke up, groggy and complaining about being tired. They didn't notice the state I was in, or if they did, they chalked it up to me being a sore loser about the dare or just not a morning person. When I got home, the first thing I did was go into my own bathroom and stare at my reflection. My heart was pounding, my palms sweating. I braced myself for the demonic grin, the dead eyes, but there was nothing, just me. Tired terrified me. My reflection mimicked my movements perfectly, my frown, the way I ran a shaking hand through my hair. It was just me. Relief so potent it almost made my knees buckle, washed over me. Maybe it was Liam's house. I must have drifted off eventually because I remember waking up with a jolt. The room was dark. My desk lamp was off. I didn't remember turning it off. A flicker of the old panic ignited in my chest. I sat up, heart thudding, and fumbled for my phone on the nightstand. Its screen flared to life, momentarily blinding me. The time read 3:07 a.m. The witching hour, great. I shone the phone's flashlight around my room. Everything seemed normal. I stared, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. It couldn't be. It just couldn't. I looked down at my own phone, still clutched in my shaking hand. Plain black case. Exactly as it should be. I slowly, ever so slowly, raised my eyes back to the mirror. The reflection was still there, holding its phone, the light from its screen catching that pattern. It was definitely an eye. Then it moved. Not me, the reflection. Its head tilted just slightly, a slow, deliberate movement. Its eyes, my eyes, seemed to focus more intently on me, as if it had just realized I'd noticed the phone case. A slow smile, that same horrifying, unnatural smile from Liam's hallway, began to spread across its face. Wider and wider it stretched, far beyond what should be humanly possible. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. How could I? Every shadow in my room seemed to writhe with unseen menace. Every creak of the house was IT approaching. I was convinced that any moment that thing would step out of the mirror. Why hadn't it done so already? Was it playing with me? Was it biding its time? Or maybe it couldn't. Maybe it was trapped there and this was its way of tormenting me, its only outlet. For a few days, it actually seemed to work. The oppressive feeling of being watched lessened. I started to sleep a little better, though I still woke up frequently, heart pounding, expecting to see that grinning face. But with all the mirrors covered, there was nowhere for it to appear. Or so I hoped. I became hyper-aware of reflections, though. A puddle on the street after rain would make me cross the road. I'd squint at shop windows as I passed, terrified of catching a glimpse of myself, of it. The kitchen window was large, a big pane of glass, and in its reflection I saw the kitchen behind me, the counters, the cabinets, and myself. My reflection was standing there, its back to the yard just like me, but it wasn't looking at the sandwich. It was looking directly at me out of the reflection, and it was smiling, that same wide, horrifying smile. Its hand was raised and it tapped its finger against the glass of the window, right where its reflection met mine. Tap, tap, tap. I didn't move. I couldn't. My feet felt like they were nailed to the floor. Beckoning? What did it mean by beckoning? Did it want me to touch the glass, to join it somehow? The very thought sent a fresh wave of revulsion and terror through me. Its smile remained fixed, that awful, knowing grin. Its eyes, though, they seemed to change. They grew darker, more intense, almost hypnotic. I felt a strange pull, a morbid curiosity warring with my instinct for self-preservation. I just ran. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to be away from any reflective surface, away from that thing. I ended up in a park, collapsing onto a bench under a large tree, chest heaving, tears streaming down my face. People gave me strange looks, but I didn't care. How could I explain that I was running from my own reflection, that a demonic version of myself was claiming ownership of me? I looked down at my hands, shaking. My hands. Strangely, nothing happened that night, or the next, or the night after that. No tapping, no smiling reflection, nothing. It was quiet, too quiet. After the constant torment, the silence was almost more unnerving. Was it gone? Had it given up? Or was this just another one of its games? A way to lull me into a false sense of security before striking again. I found myself compulsively checking reflections, my heart leaping into my throat every time, bracing for the horror. It was a Saturday morning, about a month after that horrifying night at Liam's. I was starting to feel almost normal. I'd even managed to hang out with Liam and Mark a couple of times, though I was still jumpy around them, especially if we were near any mirrors. They'd noticed I was off, but I think they just figured I was stressed about exams or something. I was in my room, getting ready to go out. I'd uncovered my closet mirror a few days before, and so far, so good. I couldn't shake that image of the rippling skin. It was burned into my mind, just like the smile, just like the tapping. All day I felt strange, disconnected. I kept touching my own face, my arms, expecting them to feel different, less solid. I'd catch my reflection in shop windows, in car doors, and I'd stare, searching for that ripple, that instability. Nothing. It was always normal. But the doubt was there now, a corrosive acid eating away at my sanity. You know, it's funny, or maybe not funny at all, how you pick up these weird habits after something breaks you. I still check my voicemails religiously every single morning, even though nobody leaves them anymore. It's all texts now, right? But I check because of Liam, because of the last one he ever left me. Or maybe it wasn't him. Maybe it was the thing pretending to be him, the thing that took him during that sleepover at my parents' place years ago. The timestamp, 3:17 a.m. So I pressed play, and it wasn't Liam's voice. Not really. It was stretched thin like an old cassette tape being eaten by the player, garbled thick like someone trying to scream through a mouthful of mud underwater. There was this awful background noise, a relentless rhythmic clicking, almost like fingernails tapping on glass, but wetter. And underneath that, a low, guttural gurgling. It wasn't mechanical, not like faulty signal. It sounded hideously organic. My first reaction was denial. Obviously, it had to be a prank, right? Liam was known for that stuff, elaborate, sometimes kind of mean-spirited jokes. Maybe he'd use some voice-changing app, maybe he'd loop some weird sound effects. It had to be that, because the alternative was unthinkable, that the sounds were real. That Liam was in trouble at 3:17 a.m. somewhere unknown, possibly hurt, possibly much worse. And that somehow his phone had called me during. I needed someone else to hear it. I couldn't trust my own ears, my own panic. Maybe I was imagining the words, maybe the sounds weren't as bad as I thought. We had two other friends who were supposed to come to the sleepover but delayed last minute, Sarah and Ben. I shot them both a text, something vague like, "You guys need to hear this weird voicemail Liam left me last night. It's messed up." Sarah replied almost instantly. "What happened?" Ben took longer, probably still asleep. I couldn't stay in my room anymore. The walls felt like they were closing in, the shadows lengthening even as the sun climbed higher outside. I went downstairs, trying to act normal. My parents were in the kitchen, reading the paper, drinking coffee. The sheer mundanity of it felt surreal compared to the chilling secret tucked away on my phone. "Morning, sleepyhead," my mom said, smiling. "Did Liam get off okay last night? He seemed a bit pale." My throat tightened. Yeah, Mom." Later that day, I met up with Sarah and Ben at our usual spot, a small, slightly run-down park near my house. I couldn't wait any longer, the anxiety was eating me alive. I found a relatively secluded bench under a large oak tree, the dappled sunlight filtering through the leaves doing little to calm my nerves. They arrived together, looking curious, maybe a little worried by the urgency in my texts. "Okay, Mark, what's going on?" Sarah asked immediately, sitting down beside me. I played it again and again. We huddled closer, straining our ears, the park sounds fading into insignificance. This time, Sarah gasped when my name came through, that distorted, panicked whisper. "Mark!" Ben's eyes shot up, meeting mine. He'd heard it too. We let it play out, the clicking and gurgling seeming even more pronounced now that we were focused. Then came the final words, the chillingly calm phrase layered over the wet horror. "It's still here." Silence descended again, thick and heavy. Calling Liam's parents was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. Explaining was awkward, horrifying. We didn't play them the voicemail, how could we? But we told them Liam hadn't made it home, that we were worried, that he'd left my place feeling unwell, and that the last contact was this garbled, disturbing voicemail at an impossible time. Mrs. Davison started crying immediately, a gut-wrenching sound that made my stomach clench. The police came, asked questions, took notes. They listened to my story, my parents' corroboration of Liam leaving around midnight. I hesitated, then played them the voicemail. The officer, a weary-looking guy named Miller, listened intently, his expression unreadable. He frowned, replayed it. "Static, distortion. Sounds like a bad connection, maybe water damage to the phone," he offered, though he didn't sound convinced. Ben set up his laptop on the coffee table in the living room. The three of us huddled around it, the screen casting an eerie blue glow on our anxious faces. He imported the audio file, the jagged waveform appearing on the screen like a visual representation of the horror. It looked chaotic, unpredictable spikes of static interspersed with lower, denser blocks that must have been the gurgling and clicking. "Okay," Ben muttered, adjusting his headphones. Ben kept working, trying to isolate Liam's voice, specifically the words "Mark" and "It's still here." He managed to clean them up slightly, stripping away some of the overlapping gurgle and static. Hearing my name, clearer now, spoken in that thin, terrified shred of Liam's voice, sent a fresh wave of ice through my veins. It was undeniably him, and he sounded utterly, hopelessly terrified. But the final phrase, "It's still here." When Ben filtered that, something new emerged. Suddenly, all the lights in the house flickered. Once, twice, then steadied. We all jumped, Sarah letting out a small scream. "Probably just the grid," Ben said, trying to sound reassuring, but his voice lacked conviction. It felt too coincidental, happening right after we isolated that whispering sound. It felt like a response, like we'd poked something and it was letting us know it noticed. I looked towards the window. It was fully dark outside now, the streetlights casting an orange, sickly glow. We stayed like that for what felt like an eternity, huddled in the near darkness, straining our ears. The clicking didn't return, but the silence wasn't comforting. It was tense, brittle, like thin ice stretched over a dark abyss. Eventually, Ben whispered, "Okay, okay, maybe. Maybe it was just the house settling." He didn't sound convinced. Neither was I. Sarah was trembling, her eyes darting nervously towards the stairs. "I want to go home," she said, her voice small. Nobody wanted to go upstairs, obviously, but we couldn't just stay huddled in the living room all night waiting. What if it came down? What if Liam? What if whatever happened to him happened because he was alone up there? My parents were up there too. That thought finally spurred me into action, overriding the fear. "My parents," I choked out. We have to make sure they're okay." Ben nodded grimly, grabbing the heaviest thing nearby, a solid brass fireplace poker. We exchanged terrified glances. The attic. We never went in the attic. It was cramped, dusty, filled with forgotten junk and probably spiders. Why would the door be open? And why would that sound be coming from inside? Ben gestured towards my parents' room, mouthing, "Check them." I nodded, my throat too dry to speak. While Ben and Sarah stood frozen, weapons raised, eyes fixed on the attic door crack, I crept down the hallway towards my parents' bedroom. Ben made the decision. He took a deep breath, tightened his grip on the poker, and reached for the attic doorknob. Sarah whimpered softly behind me. I raised my hands, ready to push or pull or do something, though I had no idea what. Ben turned the knob slowly. It didn't creak. He pulled the door open wider, maybe a foot or two, revealing not complete darkness, but a sliver of the attic space faintly illuminated by something. It wasn't moonlight. Time seemed to slow down. My breath hitched in my chest. Ben stumbled back a step, pulling the door wider. Sarah gasped, a choked, terrified sound. The figure in the attic continued to rise, impossibly tall, its limbs seeming too long, bending at unnatural angles. It was shrouded in shadow, its features obscured, but I got an impression of smooth, pale skin, like stretched parchment, and limbs that moved with a horrifying, jerky fluidity. It wasn't wearing clothes. Primal fear took over. There was no thought, no strategy, just pure, unadulterated terror. Ben yelled, a raw, incoherent sound, and slammed the attic door shut. He fumbled with the lock, a flimsy hook-and-eye latch, ridiculously inadequate. The whispering stopped the instant the door closed, plunging the landing back into near silence, broken only by our ragged gasps for breath. Sarah was sobbing hysterically, clutching my arm so tight her nails dug into my skin. We burst into my parents' room, flipping on the light switch. The sudden brightness was jarring after the oppressive darkness of the hallway. My parents startled awake, confused, alarmed. "Mark, what is it? What's wrong?" my mom cried, sitting bolt upright. Explaining felt impossible, insane. "No time," Ben gasped, pulling my dad towards the door. "We have to leave, now. Something's in the house." My dad, groggy but sensing the genuine panic, didn't argue. That's where the memory gets hazy. It's all flashes after that. Running, screaming. The feeling of icy cold air as we burst out the front door into the pre-dawn chill. My parents, utterly bewildered but swept along by our terror. Ben pulling, shoving, getting everyone towards his car parked down the street. I remember looking back at the house, at my bedroom window on the second floor. There was no light on, but I could swear I saw a face in the darkness. Pale, indistinct, watching us leave.